Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, under record-breaking summer temperatures, Iraqis across the country are protesting electricity cuts and widespread government corruption. Now, their Prime Minister introduced a reform plan, but does it go far enough? Can you imagine temperatures 50 Celsius, 122 Fahrenheit? That was the start of protests that we're following, we're unpacking. It gives you a little bit of the backstory, just a tiny little bit. Yeah. What do you have?
And of course, that's all without electricity. So
Yes.
that's why people are going to the
Yes.
streets to express their displeasure with this. People are also sharing videos of what this looks like, these protests. Take a look at this Instagram video. This is from Mohammed al-Umairi, and he shows this protest where people, you can see scores around a circle, a huge Iraqi flag, really expressing their anger. Of course, for those of you at home, we want you to weigh in on this conversation. You can send us your tweets with hashtag AJStream.
Hi, my name is Mariam Wissam al-Dabbagh. I'm a writer and researcher on Iraqi diaspora and migration, and I'm on the stream.
Angered by their government's performance over the years, Iraqis have taken to the streets of cities across the country demanding change. Under soaring summer temperatures, thousands have been protesting for nearly 7 weeks now. What started out as frustration with electricity shortages and just a lack of basic services has expanded into a youth-led movement against widespread government corruption, constant political infighting and mismanagement of the country's revenues. Now, the Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi's government responded with some changes. First, he introduced a reforms package that includes the elimination of the 3 deputy prime ministers and 3 vice presidents' posts, reducing the budget for personal security for senior officials, reopening corruption cases, and removing sectarian quotas from senior government posts. Then he cut his cabinet from 33 members to 22 and combined some ministries to increase efficiency and accountability. The UN and Iraq's top Shia cleric, Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani, have praised Abadi's efforts, but the protests have not stopped. Iraqis remain in the streets calling for fast implementation of those reforms and demanding changes to the country's judiciary and constitution. To help us talk about this, we're joined by Haider al-Shakiri, a youth activist who's been attending the protests in Baghdad. Mustafa Salem is a reporter for the Washington Post in Iraq who's been attending the protests as well. Sujad Jihad is a managing director of Al-Bayan Center for Planning and Studies in Baghdad. And Zaid al-Ali is author of The Struggle for Iraq's Future: How Corruption, Incompetence and Sectarianism Have Undermined Democracy. Gentlemen, it's good to have you here with us. Sujad, these protests, when you first saw them springing up, what did you make of them? Who's actually out there protesting?
It's actually fascinating seeing the coalition of people that are involved. You have liberals, conservatives, you have students, you have the elderly, you have people who are retired from the military, for example, some of the members of the Communist Party, really, an assembly of Iraqi society, portions from every part wanting to get involved, wanting to express their displeasure and make sure that it's not that they're targeting any political party or it's sectarian or anything. It's a complaint that no Iraqi citizen is happy with the state of the nation as it is. In the heat, the poor services, seeing that the political elite really haven't changed since 2003, 2004, it's been the same and people are fed up. So it was fascinating to go out to these protests and see the different types of people involved. And social media has helped as well, obviously, to get people to engage and express their opinions.
Heidi, you hit the streets, you went out protesting. At what point did you say, I've had enough, I'm actually going to let my government know I am not happy?
I mean, I said that 10 years ago, but I'm saying it again now. We're not happy, and we tried to go on the streets a while back, but it was forcefully shut down, and then again, and now there is a cooperation between us and between the security forces where we went down and we saw that things are, moving and something is happening, something is responding back to us. So that's what happened.
Well, Mustafa, you heard Sajjad and Haider give a list of some of the things that people want. I want to show you a few more demands from some protesters. This is via a video posted on YouTube where someone went down to the city of Najaf and asked people, why are you protesting? And this is what they had to say. Take a look.
نريد دولة مدنية علمانية دولة مواطنة ما تكون دولة على أساس محاصصة طائفية لأن المحاصصة الطائفية هي أس البلاء هي اللي أدت البلدنا إلى الوضع المزري اللي إحنا فيه. شكرا لك.
ما نريد أي عمامة بالسياسة، نعزل الدين عن السياسة، أهم شيء هذا، لأن ما نهبونا وباقونا غير العمايم غير المتدينين، نريد حكومة ما نقول علمانية، نريد حكومة مدنية فقط. نريد أن يعاملون المواطن كإنسان لأن فقدنا الإنسانية بهذا البلد.
So Mustafa, you've been out there, you're covering this, you've been in the protests. If there's one thing that you could say people want most in their demands, what would it be?
Well, this demand basically, and I went out for this demand actually because Iraq is not an Islamic country. Iraq have many religions, many sects, so you cannot roll it in only one religion. And basically, even the religious authority called for a civil country. So these people are going out demanding for a civil state because they had enough. They had enough with the people who are using the religion as a cover for their corruption, for their crimes. And basically, they are going out in order to keep the religion out of these activities.
So Zay, this isn't the first time that Iraqis have gone out to protest. What's different about this time?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that's just been said. It's not the first time that this has been happening. We've had protests many times in the past, and but one of the things that's different this time is that the government's reaction hasn't been very violent in comparison to, for example, in 2011, when we had a previous round of protests. Back then, the reaction by the state was to send in thugs and to kill dozens of protesters. On this occasion, the state and the police haven't been universally violent. There hasn't been really any violent reaction by the state or by the police or the army. On the contrary, they've actually been handing out bottles of water. Apart from a couple of instances, it's basically been fine. Something else that's different about it is that as time keeps on progressing, from 2003, every year, Iraqis get more and more frustrated. So I don't think that we've reached the critical point of no return at which Iraqis simply won't take it anymore for another day, but we're getting very, very close. We're teetering on the border of collapse. So if the government finally gets its act together and understands the message that they really can't delay real substantive progress, then we will reach the point of collapse at some stage. And that'll be very ugly and horrific for everyone, I think.
So take a look here at my laptop. This is really curious here because protesters are out on the street, and then who's supporting the protesters? I'm showing you here a meme from Iraq, and we've got various politicians here all saying, I'm with the protesters. Then this little box down here says, then who exactly are the protesters against? How come the protesters have also rallied politicians at the same time? Is their concern genuine, Sajjad?
Honestly, I don't think so. Firstly, the problem with governance in Iraq is that everybody takes part. It doesn't matter what happens in the elections, everybody gets a seat at the government and in the cabinet. So you have rivals, enemies, all forced to try to work together and share power. We have the sectarian quotas and the political quotas deciding who gets what and which positions go to who. So when the protests broke out, because they weren't targeting any particular party or group, they were a rejection of the way Iraq has been run so far, a vote of no confidence against all of Iraq's politicians. And because the protests spread across the provinces, and because they were backed by the top religious authority in Najaf, al-Sistani, suddenly the politicians got a little bit of a wake-up call that, look, you are the guys who are going to be forced out of government. You will lose your jobs. Your parties will lose all the influence and power that they've built up. So, of course, they wouldn't want to stand against the people. They decided that we are going to support the protesters, even though it means, technically we'll be protesting against ourselves. And unfortunately, that message that they're sending out doesn't seem to be genuine. It's only meant to say, oh, look, protesters, we're on your side. Please don't target us. And I think this is the real point that the politicians are missing, is that people have had enough of that type of politics. We don't want sectarian or political quotas. We're not interested in a weak government made up of rivals, all taking up slices of the cake for themselves and the public services go down and the economy goes down and people suffer. And we see what happened last year with the advance of Daesh. The people lost out. It wasn't the politicians in the green zone or elsewhere. It was the people from Basra, Anbar, Nainawa, Salah ad-Din, Diyala, Baghdad. These were the guys that were losing out. And that's what we're really interested in, saying to them, look, the protesters want more than just lip service, and they want more than promises to reform one ministry or to change some of the bureaucracy. We want to see changes that impact people's lives.
So I'm hearing some skepticism there. So Haider, there's also skepticism online. This is Ruwaida, and she says there are too many corrupt sectors within the Iraqi government. Even if Haider al-Abadi, the prime minister, tries to undo that corruption, it will take time. So she's just as skeptical, Haider. Do you think that this, though, is the first step towards undoing some of that?
I mean, yeah, it is the first step, but Abadi has a very difficult job right now. I don't think anyone wants to be in his place. To prioritize what needs to be happen or what needs to be done right now, it's a very difficult. He's in a very difficult situation, and to address the protesters' demands and to do them in a timely manner, that's very hard right now. But I think he's trying to do it all at the same time without making it dangerous for himself or for the people. I think he's trying to balance it in a way that the protesters are happy and the people are happy, and then the political parties are not very
Haider,
angry.
can I ask you, what would the danger be? You said he's trying to make it so that it's not dangerous for himself, but what would the danger be?
I mean, obviously, it's a political danger on himself or on the people who are supporting him right now, or on the protests or the genuinity of the protests. So there are a lot of factors are in here, and it's a political game.
I'd like to say that there is also a danger that the politicians, the prime minister's rivals, maybe people within his own bloc, will decide to get together and put a vote of no confidence, bring down the government, bring the prime minister out, force him out, because they don't like the way the reforms are proceeding, who they're targeting, and so on. So Haider is right. The prime minister has to tread carefully. If he pushes too fast, it's possible the government could be brought down by those within it. If he goes too slow, the protesters will say, well, we haven't seen any benefit so far. We've just been told reforms. We're not feeling anything. So it is a difficult job for the PM. I don't envy him to be in this position. But I do think that he is treading lightly because of the danger of what he's stepping into. He's trying to take on Iraq's most powerful politicians, the most powerful parties, the people who've got most to lose from anti-corruption and from reforms.
So have a look here on my laptop. This is Prime Minister Abadi's Facebook page here, and there's a little note at the bottom here which talks about the reforms he's already announced, these reforms that have come directly out of the protests. Mustafa, if you actually had to categorise or summarise what the protests have achieved so far, what would you say?
Well, the protests hadn't achieved their demands, but they have achieved a starting point of creating a little changing in the political system of the government. For example, right now, Abadi is doing some secret changes right now, but still, as I said, it's not fulfilling the demands of the protesters. But before the protest, we were like moving inside a dark tunnel without any end. Right now, during this protest and the reforms, we can actually see an end in this tunnel. Even it's very far away, it's going to be a very hard road, but still, we can see an end in this tunnel that we can have the country we have always dreamed of since 2003, after the big change took place.
See, Zaid, it's not...
I totally agree with you, Mustafa.
Go ahead,
I mean, a month ago, I had almost no hope. We had a very bad security situation. Every week there were a couple of car explosions in Baghdad. ISIS was advancing and took over 1/3 of the country. We had really bad services, and over all of that, the politicians were fighting amongst themselves in a very corrupt manner. So, our budget is going lower and lower, and we're getting loans. So the situation was really, really bad, and there was no hope whatsoever. But now you can see there's a glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel, as Mustafa said.
Haider, you're smiling. You sound so optimistic there. And so that's why I want to share this tweet here, and I want to pass it over to Zaid. This is Ahmed, and so we asked him whether or not he thinks that the Prime Minister is capable of effecting this change that he's put forward, and he answered in Arabic. We've translated it here. Ahmed says he is capable. He's got the support of the people and the support of the clergy to hand over all of those corrupt to the judiciary, regardless of what their political position is. So Zaid, he seems to be saying that all the stars are aligned for the Prime Minister. The time is now.
I mean, I agree that the time is now, but I don't share my colleague's optimism, and I don't share the conclusion that this is a first step, and I don't share that we're heading in the right direction. We may be, but I don't think that there's any evidence that we are heading in the right direction just yet. And the reason why I say that is because eliminating the vice president's positions and is eliminating the deputy prime minister's positions and reducing the cabinet from 33 to 22 members doesn't help anyone's lives improve in Iraq. It only saves a tiny percentage of the state's budget. What it does do, however, it eliminates some of the prime minister's political rivals, right? And what we should do is look at, out of the 33 cabinet members that we originally had, if you look at the 22 names that are still in cabinet today, who are they? Are they the best ministers out of the 33? Or are they just the same type of people that have been running the country into the ground since 2003? And the answer is the latter, right? And no one will dispute that. If you look at the people that are on the table today at the cabinet meeting that took place today, there are the worst forms, the worst elements of Iraqi society were at that table. So I think it's premature to say that we're heading in the right direction. I'm very happy to hear that people are saying that we have new hope and so on and so forth, and that's a very good thing. But I really think that people should still be very disappointed at what's happened so far and should demand for a lot more. Because so far we don't have anything that will point us, that will head us, that will help us achieve a better solution and better standards of living for Iraqis.
So Jack, go ahead.
This is happening.
It's not just about accepting the first few reforms that the Prime Minister has put that mainly affect politicians and his rivals and so on. I think people should keep up the pressure in terms of protests. I think they will continue to protest. And people do want to see changes, but I think we've got to give credit to the Prime Minister that he is being different from his predecessors. He's actually going to do something. Okay, he might have been put under pressure, his hand might have been forced, but the fact is he seems to be willing to do something. So I think it's a bit too early to judge and say that this will end in failure or we're not going in the right direction. I think we've got to give him a chance. I think the protesters they're supportive of the PM, and part of the reasons why people are going out to demonstrate is to say, we support the Prime Minister. We want to see more reforms. We want to see you to push ahead, continue to be courageous. Even the al-Sistani in the prayer speech said that we want you to strike with an iron fist, be brave, name the names of people who are stopping you from making reforms. So I think the PM's on the right track, but as Zaid says, people want to see what actually affects their lives. Getting rid of deputies and vice presidents, how does that help, turn 2 hours of electricity every few hours into, complete electricity, or at least halfway? How does that transform to me getting plenty of water or me getting better security? I think that's what we want to see. The next round will be more important, and the round after that, change in the cabinet, an improvement in the economy, students who have graduated looking for jobs. There's none there. The private sector is poor, and the public sector can't hire anymore. So I think, PM's began, I think maybe a baby step, if you want to call it. He's on the right track, hopefully. But there's more to come, and I'm sure the protesters will continue to demand progress.
Haider, what do you want to add?
Yes, I know. I totally agree with Sajjad and Zaid here, but the protests are increasing in size every Friday. And on one Sunday, when Abadi put his first set of reforms, people went out on that Sunday night, and they went to Tahrir and they supported Abadi, and they said, Abadi, I support you as a person, as a citizen, because he responded to the people in a way that the previous Prime Minister did not do. So people are hopeful in that way. Of course, the decisions might not be as straight as people wanted them to be, but I think we're heading there slowly. And I think people should go out again every Friday to pressure the Prime Minister, to pressure the rest of the government to actually implement and do some major changes. And I think that the response itself, and then the attitude that the Prime Minister is dealing with this, and the security forces, how are they dealing with this, and the way that the other politicians are agreeing to it, and then the support of everyone from the community to the Marjaya, it all puts down in a positive attitude.
All right. So it's interesting, Haida, because you're sitting there in Iraq, and in Baghdad, and you are hopeful, but Zaid is nodding his head. Zaid, what's the problem?
My problem is this. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be Cassandra, but Sajad referred to the next round, the second round, and the third round, and hopefully things will be heading in a better direction, or we'll get more of what it is that we want. But in fact, if you look at the first round of changes that we already have, the Prime Minister's plan that was approved just a few days ago in the Parliament, it's already very, very problematic. And it's not even a question of looking at the fine print, because the whole plan was just a page and a half long. The Prime Minister gave to himself the authority to dismiss local officials all over the country, provincial officials, right? To dismiss them and to hold them accountable for corruption and violating the law. The way in which normal countries deal with that, real democracies deal with that, is through the courts. Prime Ministers don't have that authority. And the reason why is because Prime Ministers are politicians. You don't give politicians the capacity or the institutional ability to try people for corruption. That's what the courts are supposed to do. And there, the Prime Minister's plan is very, very problematic, because he's centralizing authority in his own hands, and also he has a huge amount of contempt for institutions. And that's always been the problem in Iraq, not just since 2003, but since the beginning of last century, is institutions are never developed in Iraq, right? And if you look at the Prime Minister's plan in relation to the courts and institutions, all it says is we shall ask for the courts to develop their own plan to reform themselves. And if anyone knows anything about the Iraqi courts, they know that the courts are extremely corrupt and extremely ineffective. If your plan is to reform the courts, to ask the courts to reform themselves, you're not going to achieve anything. That's nonsense, right? So the plan in of itself, already what it is that we have, is extremely inadequate. And I really wish that our colleagues in Baghdad, our friends who are leading the protest movement, would not just sit down and wait for the Prime Minister to come up with a new round of reforms and new ideas, but for them to make more specific demands themselves. The politicians are not capable of doing it. al-Abadi is a politician who's been in the political class since 2003. There's very little that distinguishes him from the others. The protesters themselves need to produce their own plan, specific plans and specific ideas.
Zaid, this has been happening.
Zaid, I want to get in here because you issued a call to the people of Iraq. I hear our other guests talking, but Zaid issued a call to the people of Iraq and kind of put out a challenge for them. So I want someone from Iraq to respond to that, but this is a woman, actually. This is Zainab Qasim, and she sent us a video comment, so I want to get her voice into this mix. Here's what she told the stream.
I believe it is too early to say. These are good signs for better future and good policies reforms. After decades of waiting, Iraqi became expert of waiting. I will not translate Iraqi government promises into bright future until I see it in action on the ground.
So Mustafa, you can see there's some cautious optimism. Also here on Twitter, this is Hamza, and he says, making sure that these reforms are implemented is a two-way street. So he's saying kind of the same thing that Zainab was saying. Whose hands is that in if it's not just in the Prime Minister's hands? Mustafa.
When they had demands, they had. First, they wanted to provide services, although I couldn't hear all the voice because I have some technical problems here. But I want to say that they had certain demands. They wanted to provide services. They wanted an actual plan how to provide services for them. And basically also, they called last Friday, the Friday of fixing the judiciary. There are a lot of issues about the judiciary, and the protesters right now are focusing on the judiciary in order to make it fixed, in order to be a starting point to do all the reforms, because there won't be any reforms unless we will have an independent, honest judiciary. About the videos, sorry, I couldn't hear them because I had technical problems
That's okay.
earlier.
All right, so Haida, we're just wrapping up this part of the show before I take you all to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. You're going to go out to protest. Are you protesting this Friday?
Hopefully, yes.
All right. Why?
And this Friday, it will be about the judiciary system. It will be about the judges and the head of the judges, because even though Abadi announced a lot of reforms, no punishment has been made.
Right.
A lot of names have been announced, but no steps have been taken into
so Haider
concrete
and Zaid
steps.
and Mustafa and Sajad, the conversation continues in our post show. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Take care. Hello, welcome back. This is the Streams Online Post Show. We've been talking about the wave of protests in Iraq and whether or not the government's reform package goes far enough to establish the change so many Iraqis are calling for. Have a look here on my laptop. We just had a look back between 2006 and 2014 to see how much oil revenue Iraq had. $700 billion and exporting over 3 million barrels every single day. Sajad, a lot of people will be watching this. I'm sure a lot of Iraqis will be watching this and say, why on earth do we not have basic services when we're so wealthy? What's the answer?
I mean, that's exactly why people are protesting. Where has all this money gone?
Yeah.
Haven't the corrupt politicians had enough? Why has the electricity situation literally in some places gone backwards? It was better in 2003, it was better in 2004. Why in 2015 things have gotten worse for some people? That's the very question people want to understand, and some of them have reached their own answers that, well, it's obviously just been wasted and stolen by some of the politicians that we have out there, the parties.
How do you steal $700 billion? How do you do that?
No person took that. I mean, lots of people involved. We're talking about a network of literally thousands of people and money taken out of the country, land bought and properties and contracts for $4 or $5 billion for weapon sales, for transport, for example, for construction projects, and each one of these you take $1 billion out of, you take several hundred million out of, and nobody gets punished, and people down the chain continue to do so for smaller amounts. And because 10 years, 12 years later, we've not had any improvement to people's lives, people are just fed up now. They don't want to hear promises. And as Zaid alluded to earlier, yes, the problem is the same faces that came in 2003, 2004 to take over the country from Paul Bremer and the CPA are still there. And people have very little trust in this current crop of politicians and the parties that we have at the moment. They want rid of them. They want new faces. They want people who are genuinely wanting to improve Iraq, not people who want to benefit themselves, not people who just want to take what they can. And I think that's part of the problem that we have is we haven't seen a real change in the current crop of politicians that we have.
I'm so glad you said that, actually, on wanting new faces, because that's exactly what someone told us. This is Aisha on Twitter, and she says that they are not including young people, they, of course, being the government, who are desperate to be involved in the discourse of Iraq's future. And she goes on to say, you can't keep reforming a broken foundation that isn't sustainable. You need a radical restructuring by consulting young people. So, Haider, you're a young person. Do you feel like you have a voice?
In the decision-making process, no, not at all. A lot of young people are very frustrated with what's happening right now, and that's one of the main reasons that they are going out, and they're increasingly the numbers are increasing every Friday. And on the first Friday, 2 friends came with me. On the second Friday, 10, and then on the third Friday, I think more than 30 people came with me. So a lot of young people are participating in this, and I think they're leading this in a way.
See, Zaid, if it's taken so long for any progress to happen in Iraq, there are obviously major challenges that politicians are having trouble getting their head around. I can't believe that every single one of Iraq's politicians doesn't want the country to improve. If we're being realistic about this, what are the biggest challenges?
There's so many to list. It's difficult to actually tackle this. But I think that the protests are great because they produce what they're doing is that they're putting a lot of generalized pressure on the political class, particularly on the Prime Minister, but generally on the political class, to improve their behavior. But I think the biggest challenge is to develop a mechanism so that you have individualized pressure on each and every official in the state. If there's no sense that state officials are going to be held accountable individually, not generally, but individually for their actions, for their failures, and for the crimes that they commit in the exercise of their functions, then they won't improve their performance. And there, what you really need to do is you need to develop a mechanism through which officials are held accountable. And the only mechanism that you can do that can work in that case is not what the Prime Minister is suggesting, which is for him to have the authority to fire people and so on and so forth. The only mechanism that can work is the courts. And there you have a major problem because the courts are extremely ineffective. So what you need is you need to reform the courts in a convincing way. And there the protesters, what they're doing is that they're saying that Medhat Mahmoud, who is the head of the judicial sector, needs to go. And maybe he does. But even if he does go, that won't resolve the court's performance. What you need to do is you need to develop a really detailed plan to allow for every single judge in the country to start improving their performance and make sure that when they do not, that they themselves will be held accountable. And protests can't achieve that. You can't have a protest every time a judge issues a bad decision. What you need is you need to have institutional mechanisms that will allow for, that will ensure that the courts will improve their performance.
Mustafa, you're...
But don't you think that the protests are putting pressure on the politicians to actually pressure the judges to be more reliable?
If I may interrupt you, I agree that the judiciary must be fixed, yes, because right now, maybe Medhat Mahmoud should go or not, but what has been done all of this, what has been focusing on the judiciary or the government in general, are the protests. So the protests are doing something, but then it's left up to the right people to fix it. Right now, as Haidar said, the next Friday will be for fixing the judiciary. And I have talked with judges and the spokesman of the judiciary. He said that they are having ongoing meetings to ask the parliament to legalize some laws in order to expand their authorities. And right now, they have established some courts specialized to deal with the corruption cases that are related to the Committee of Integrity.
So gentlemen,
I think we are doing some progress here.
All right, so gentlemen, just take a pause for a moment because there's a gap. Zaid, hold tight for a second. There's a gap between you and Zaid wanted to respond to Haidar. Haidar, he wasn't ignoring you. It just takes a little while for him to hear you. Zaid, now go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry about that, but what was just said right now is very problematic, right? So I also heard this news, the declaration by the courts that they're going to establish specialized courts to deal with corruption. In fact, there have been specialized courts relating to corruption for years now, right? What they're just proposing to do is to establish new courts. And of course, based on the courts, the judicial system's existing record, there's no reason to believe that they're going to do a better job this time than they did in the past. The courts themselves are desperately ineffective, right? You cannot rely on them, and you cannot rely on the government to improve the courts.
So Zaid, give us an example of how the courts are, in your words, desperately ineffective. A very clear example, and this is something that's been very well documented, is that in every single criminal case in Iraq, defendants always claim that they're tortured, right? And often they'll have bruises and cuts on their faces and so on and so forth. Judges never inquire about where those bruises and cuts come from. They never order medical examinations. And even when there is a medical examination, the judges never find anyone responsible for torture. Everyone knows that in Iraqi jails, torture takes place all the time, right? Every day, in every single prison, so on and so forth. It happens regularly, and it never stops. But judges never hold anyone accountable for them. That's one. Another issue is all this corruption that's taking place, right? In Iraq, we have an inquisitorial judicial system, which means that judges are the ones who are supposed to do the investigating and so on and so forth. Where are all the people that are being sent to jail? Why are no senior politicians in Iraq in jail? The only senior politicians that have been convicted for corruption were allowed to leave the country. You have 3 senior politicians who left, 1 Minister of Trade, 1 Minister of Electricity, and 1 Minister of Defense. All 3 left the country with billions of dollars in their pockets. Zaid, if I was Minister of Electricity in Iraq, I would leave the country too.
They all get away completely free, right? Nothing happens to them.
Many officials have been convicted.
Sure.
The judicial authority has been convicted, but it's up to the executive authority to arrest them. Well, they are not active to arrest them, and they are allowing them to get out of the country. So it's not the mistake of the legal system. It's also particularly a mistake of the interior or defense ministry.
See, gentlemen, you've given us a little flavour of, I'm sure, the conversations that Iraqis have amongst themselves all of the time. We're out of time right now. I'm going to leave the last word with our community. I know we will be coming back to this topic again and again in future editions of the stream. But for now, Malika, what do you have?
Well, this last word is actually a question, Femi, that I'm going to pose to Sajdad. If you can give us your last word in just a sentence, because Abdel Fattah says the Iraqi prime minister is trying to fight corruption, but you can't fight it when this whole system is corrupted and it's based on sectarianism. So the question to you, Sajdad, is do you think that these new reforms are going to lead to a more united Iraq?
Actually, I think it will lead to a greater challenge to the Prime Minister. It is a tricky moment in Iraq's history. If the PM continues to get the support of the people, if he actually really goes to at the heart of the problem, make reforms, to the way power sharing and sectarian quotas are enforced in Iraq, tackles people from his own bloc and his own party, continues to support or seek support of Parliament to make the necessary legislative changes, looks at, as Zaid said, seriously working with the judiciary to make, far-seated, far-rooted reforms rather than just lip service and let's establish another set of courts that have been effective in the past. If he can do that, then I think, yes, we might be able to see an end to the corrupt and weak set of institutions and governance that we have in Iraq. However, if he is defeated, if he can't push through reforms, maybe if he's pressured, maybe if he just doesn't feel that he has enough support to continue, then I think things could take for a turn for the worse. The country will become more divided. We have an incredibly large amount of people with money, with weapons, with their own motivations for wanting to take over certain parts of the country. So we could see a fracturing of the country rather than more unity. And of course, sectarianism is one of the things that could light the fire that will destroy Iraq. But we remain hopeful despite what we've seen in the past.
Sajdad, Mustafa, Haider and Zaid, thank you for being part of this conversation. Really appreciate your time today. Take care.